Well, good afternoon. I'm Al Dominic, your host. It's Tuesday, March 9th. It is 2 o'clock on the East Coast, which by my calculation means it's about 11 out on the West Coast. So for those joining across the United States, we are just really thrilled to be able to spend a little bit of time surfacing some really important ideas and business opportunities that are very pertinent to financial institutions of really all sizes across this great country of ours. We've learned a lot over the last 12 months about how to really try to use people's time wisely, and this new exchange that we're going to get into right now, we think reflects that. The FinXTech exchange, it naturally is brought to you by Bank Director, but we couldn't do it without the support of Aperture, Nextsoft, Narmi, and Mantle. And we've got some really interesting perspectives that some folks from each of those companies will share with us over about a 40-minute period before we hop into some really interesting peer exchange conversations. Again, our interest today is really to take some of the best and brightest minds in the industry and put them right in front of you so that you can get a lot smarter, a lot faster about different opportunities to strengthen your business and your performance. So I've got only a handful of housekeeping details. Forgive me if these sound familiar. I know a lot of us have spent time on virtual programs like this. But the housekeeping is important, and I don't want to miss the fact to remind everyone that you are automatically on mute. That means your dog can come in and bark, we won't get upset. Your kids can come in and ask you for a soda, and it's up to you as a parent if you want to give them that permission on a Tuesday. If you think about the viewing experience that you're looking at right now, if you're on a laptop, there's ways that you can really improve your experience. There's a slide at the bar on the bottom of the screen that puts presenters into full screen mode. You can certainly do that. We encourage you to ask questions throughout. You can see that there's an opportunity to kind of click a Q&A button on the right side of your screen. When those come in, I'll do my best to facilitate a conversation without interrupting the thoughts that somebody might be sharing at the moment. Again, we'll do everything we can to make sure those questions come out as smoothly as possible. There's no need to take detailed notes. All of this is going to be shared in digital form, really on demand in about 24 hours. That'll live on the bankdirector.com website. Everyone here will get an email so that you'll be able to access it at your convenience. If you have any technical issues, just use one of those moderator chats that you can see on the side of the screen. And again, we'll do our best to take care of it. But we're not magicians, so there might be some things that are totally out of our control. And so in advance, I will apologize, but hopefully won't really have to cash that card anytime soon. So those are the housekeeping details for this afternoon. Now I have the real pleasure of starting to introduce our wonderful cast of characters. I'm going to have David Bisek, the Vice President of API Platforms at Aperture, to turn on his monitor first. Aperture, for those who aren't familiar, is a great digital banking provider with a real vision to create a better digital experience solution for financial institutions, really regardless of size. Next gentleman who's going to click in with us is Walter Hoffman. He's the Senior Vice President of Product for the Omni platform at Nextsoft. This is one of the market leaders in secure, comprehensive, and complete workflow API connectivity. And I know they do a lot of great work connecting fintechs to banks and credit unions throughout the U.S. Next one who joined us is Nikhil Lankan-Paul, who's the co-founder of Narmi, a New York City-based financial technology firm that really builds great enterprise solutions in digital banking. Known Nikhil, I know he just had a very successful round that he raised, so we're pleased to have him. And then, kind of bringing it all home is Raj Patel. Raj, as he joins us now, is the COO and co-founder of Mantle, a technology company with, as I look at it, probably the highest performing account opening solution on the market. So let me just make sure I see everyone. Just a nice friendly wave to each other. Now with your other hand to the audience. Okay, so we're good to go. So now, I've got two. I'm trying to use my energy to pass it on. Again, we want to use our time wisely here. We've got, as I mentioned, about 40 minutes before we break into these peer exchanges. When we get into the peer exchange, those are really designed to facilitate a free-flowing conversation. Ideally, you've thought about APIs and how it might benefit your organization, but we think there's some things that really can ground the conversation into something more practical. So, my vantage point really, comes from talking with a number of bank CEOs who over the last year have had to transform their businesses really on the fly. And as they talk to their boards about the digital investments in the really delivery transformation efforts taking place, it's always interesting to hear how they describe change and really how seriously their teams have taken it. And we've seen numerous examples of companies that have done really well. But I'm kind of curious just to get each of your perspectives, knowing you have really strong relationships. How are you seeing, and David, I'll start with you, how are you seeing a bank's executive leadership team really start to take the changes that were put on them and embrace them and try to, do something really cool going forward?
Hi. So I think executives at financial institutions see APIs as an opportunity for them to allow innovation and to become differentiators in the marketplace. The whole goal of digital transformation is really to provide a better experience for your customers. So keep them engaged with your financial institutions so you become a trusted partner. You provide the services that they need. And those services are changing over time really radically and very quickly, especially in the current age. People are doing things more and more digitally, more and more online. And so the financial institutions know they need to be where their customers are, and that is in that digital space, and responding to their needs and then delivering new products, new features in internet time. We need to be able to provide new features quickly to meet that need and to stay competitive.
Yeah. So Raj, as I listen to David, I'm curious, to build on his perspective. Maybe you can talk a little bit about helping your customers really to understand what change can mean for them.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that happened in the last 12 months is that the data has given a lot of banks the permission structure to maybe do some changes that they were maybe resisting previously. So to give you an idea, digital adoption has accelerated in a year what it was, the track record of what it was over the last 5 years. And so what you've seen is while early adopters were using mobile and online banking and remote deposit and the mainstream was using it, you still had those holdouts. And what fortunately, everything that's happened in the last 12 months has done is it's actually driven adoption into harder to adopt segments of a bank's customer base. And what that's allowed a lot of banks and bank executives in particular to see is that when just given a little bit of a nudge or when put in a position where it's required, actually the adoption of technology can be far greater than what you might have thought. And the reliance on the physical might not actually be as much as you thought it needed to be. And by seeing that and realizing actually the bank didn't fail, actually often many of the banks on this call probably thrived over the last 12 months and their customers are even more delighted than they used to be, actually is giving a permission structure to executives to say, actually, we can actually do a little bit more radical change. We can push people maybe more to the technology solution than the physical solution than we were thinking we could before. And that's a lot more of the conversation we're having now. Things that they didn't think could change before, now they're suddenly understanding that it not only can it change, it has to change.
Yep. Walter, what are your thoughts as you listen to David and Raj? How would you add to this?
No, I have to agree a lot with Raj. I mean, if you think about the opportunity that the last 12 months have given, institutions to look at their technology and do really a serious evaluation to say, okay, what do I really need to provide to my customers, right? The consumers that are out there that are being serviced by these institutions to be able to make their experience a lot greater. If you look historically, like I think we're on iteration 4 of what online banking or mobile banking is, right? 4.0. And many institutions, while they adopted account opening, loan origination, deposit account opening solutions, if you're looking at all these things, yes, it was kind of almost like the bare minimum to offer a digital experience, but now you can really take that to what are my back office services? What can I do to really perform everything that was being offered to the branch to some extent in a digital fashion?
So, Nikhil, as I'm listening to your counterparts, it strikes me that for banks, really, it's more than just the technology. It's really the transformation of mindset and the culture and the organizational approach. What have you noticed when it comes to banks as their mindset is maybe shifted and organizations get maybe a little bit more excited to use a tool or solution that maybe a year ago they thought is out of their league?
Yeah, Al, it's an important topic and important question. Whenever I talk about this topic specifically, APIs, I really try to make it like so obvious that it's the number one business decision a banker can make. And it seems really, really odd to say that, right? It's this ambiguous topic, right? spinning up a new branch or investing in new account opening or investing in a new mobile app is so tangible, but the concept of an API is very amorphous. Nobody knows what it costs. Like, how do you generate ROI? It's a cent per call. It's very confusing. But if I were to just sum it up, I think freedom is kind of like the way I would describe it. For the first time, your bank can truly like control your own roadmap, can truly like, there's such an obvious back office process that should be there, but is not there because you have two separate vendors. Well, now for the first time, you can make that happen. And I think a lot of this has been education, and it's been publications like yourself that have made this the forefront of it. I think core banking systems are being more open to it, not charging for it, not like making it this massive R&D expenditure. So I think all of that is related in this topic. And I truly do feel that this can be a revenue driver or a cost saver, depending on what you do, not just like another technology piece you offer. So that would be kind of my introductory comments, but excited to dive in.
Yeah, and I think what's nice about the way each of you frame this is you've teased out of this first few minutes. We're going to talk about privacy. We're going to talk about business growth and finding new opportunities to delight your customer. We've got to talk about the relationship with your core provider and how that works. In some ways, this comes to the big issue of the year, which is how do you as a business stay competitive and at the same time relevant? Or some people want to be relevant and competitive, but those two words are, really important at the most strategic level. So, David, let me ask you, when I think about APIs, how is it that they're helping financial institutions right now to be competitive with the crazy amount of offerings that are being thrown into the ring? Dave, we're gonna I don't want to have to do it because then somebody's going to win bingo on this one.
There we go. Yeah, sorry. I like to think of APIs for financial institutions as sort of becoming game stakes right now. It's almost a requirement to participate in the current economy. And what that means is that it's an enabling technology. It's what allows you to participate in this growing economy where fintechs are providing value to financial institutions coming left and right. And there's all kinds of different competing technologies. And that's a hard thing for banks to deal with, is how do you understand that ecosystem? But basically, by using APIs, you are enabling your financial institution to take advantage of this new economy that is growing up around us. So it really is basically table stakes to get into this game and then to be part of your roadmap for how you remain competitive going forward.
Yeah. So Raj, I was talking with the CEO of a decent sized institution about just the transformation taking place throughout his organization. And one of the things that stood out in our conversation was he doesn't want his customers to have to take a step back as they introduce something new. And so I'm curious, what are, maybe broadly speaking, what are fintechs that you respect, which also can include Mantle, doing to make sure that banks can really maintain a trusting relationship with their customers right now, even as they're rolling out these new digital services that might be a little foreign to them?
Yeah, I think that the single biggest thing that banks do incorrectly, which leads to that, is they choose the best solution today to implement, but they don't think about, will this still be the best solution next year or the year after that or the year after that? And it dovetails into the API conversation because the API is the infrastructure that allows you to stay relevant. But I think that the industry has come from a paradigm of, I buy a piece of software, I get 1 or 2 regulatory updates a year, a little bit of security here and there, and 5 years later I get another opportunity, or 7 years later or 3 years later, depending on the contract term, I get another opportunity to then pick again the best vendor. And that is actually not a paradigm that the rest of the economy works in. The rest of the economy works in a paradigm of software as a service, where your software provider should be updating its system every week, every 2 weeks, sometimes 30, 40, 50 times a year. And when you pick a vendor that does that and comes from that paradigm, that is what a Salesforce does. That is what an Okta does. That is what, what the Valley and what some tech companies out of New York are doing. Then you actually arrive at a solution that actually stays up to date with customer demands and is constantly evolving with customer demands. And you don't get yourself in a position where you're exactly right. you might have a piece of technology right now that people are frustrated with, but your replacement cycle for that piece of technology is 3 years or 2 years away whenever your contract is up. You cannot afford to be in that situation. And so actually the single biggest criteria when purchasing a piece of software isn't is it the best piece of software now, but will it be the best piece of software over the entire length of my contract term? And that actually changes the analysis quite significantly.
Yeah, and as you're talking, it brings to mind feels like forever ago, but it was only last year that banks were throwing around the word agility, willy-nilly. So you'd hear a bank CEO saying we have to be an agile organization. If you're in a technology company, agile has a different connotation than maybe in a traditional financial institution. But I think that message that you have bears repeating. Could you maybe build a little bit further?
Yeah, so there are very tactical things that you can do to have greater agility, right? So like your vendor decisions are going to lead to having greater agility. And it doesn't mean necessarily spending more money or doing anything different, but the vendor you pick, right? And their process of updates is very important. What APIs you have in place, which is the sort of through line of this discussion, is also extremely important. I think Nikhil sort of touched on this earlier, it's the infrastructure and the piping that allows you to go faster. This morning I was talking to the chief administration officer of a bank, and he or she was talking about waiting 6 to 9 months in a queue to get API access to one of their systems of record. And the fact that they hadn't already had that procured and installed ready meant that now that when they want to actually do a project that is customer facing, to even get started on the customer facing project, they need to wait 6 to 9 months to put the infrastructure in place. And so when we're talking about investments in APIs, that's what we're talking about. It's actually an investment in a capability. And it might not be that it actually has a direct ROI today, but what it does do is it creates a tool in the toolbox to allow you to make those investments later quickly versus having to start from the start line.
Sure. And so, Nikhil, maybe I can pose this to you, given your background and your perspective. How can banks create that tailored experience that Raj is really alluding to for specific customer segments instead of just trying to have like a one size fits all approach? Because customer expectations are evolving pretty fast and evolving in unexpected places.
Yeah. No, it's so, and let me for the bankers in the room, let me just try to put Al's question more into like what I'm seeing on a day-to-day basis. So branches closed the last year, almost more than a year now. You just closed on a mortgage. You just sold your car and you've got a $20,000 check to deposit. The nice part is your mega bank peers, they don't put 2 and 2 together. Like they have one remote deposit capture limit and they don't understand that this person might need a higher limit. So like we need to increase their remote deposit capture limit. This is not a thing your mega banks or your fintech competitors like Chime and all Acorns and all these are very good at. And this is where I truly think community and regional banks can absolutely thrive over the next decade. Is personalization, is actually caring about the customer. I mean, that's what we do, but you cannot get there without strong data, strong access to data, strong understanding of who that customer is. And the thing that unlocks all that is the API. Narmi doesn't know all the data points. Narmi doesn't know they have a loan with you. They're in your Salesforce or as this. They're in your CRM as this. They're on your core as this. We know some of that. But in order for NARMI to properly allocate that higher remote deposit capture limit, APIs unlock all of that. And there's a whole nother, you should do a whole nother conversation on ESBs. I think that's a really popular strategy a lot of banks are employing now. But that to me, Al, is personalization. Personalization is not logging into online banking and saying, hi, Al, welcome. The weather is 67 degrees. Personalization is actually understanding who you are as a person and tailoring that financial experience around you. So I hope I answered the question there and gave you a little bit of an example.
You did. And I mean, again, this is meant to be a nice way to tee up the peer exchanges. So if you're watching and you have questions, that you'd like to pose to the group right now, that's great. If you want to just write them down and have them in your conversation, that's going to happen in a few minutes, that's totally okay as well. But we can take this in so many different directions. I almost feel like I have to take a pause, though, based on what Nikhil and Raj just said, and ask Walter to chime in. Most every company, regardless of the industry they're in, has a strategy. They have a business plan. They know their market. They know their customer. They have different ways of delivering their product or service. On the banking side, I feel people sometimes forget technology has been a real enabler of success for years. The ATM gets rolled out, online banking in the 90s, bill pay, all the stuff that maybe is more mature today. But banks have had technology strategies in the past. But right now, your digital strategy is really shifting, under like the sands are shifting beneath your feet, and your digital strategy probably has to shift, pretty significantly as well. So I'm curious, as we're talking APIs, how important is it for the institution to have a digital strategy planned out before adopting some new fintech products?
I think it's yeah, Al. I mean, I think it's a quintessential part of what community institutions contemplating as they want to either re-image their own brand, the services that they're bringing to their communities, and what they're offering. I think it all starts with executives really getting behind an overall message to the bank, to the employees, to the staff to say, hey, we're going to evolve, we're going to change, and really to embrace that culture of change. With that, one of the biggest things is obviously still understanding technology, right? If your end goal is to be like a neobank or like a fintech like Chime, then you have to do huge amounts of work to be able to get your conventional institution in that direction. If you're going to embrace the segments within your community, so you have small businesses, you have college students, you have retirees, if that's what your segments are, then you really need to do catering experiences towards them. And with APIs and managing that through, again, a strategy, a vision, that lens of focus that you're going to have as you transform your institution, it allows you to start breaking apart the components that are really important to you and how to identify those service vendors that are going to give you that experience. 5 to 7 years ago, we did a shift to more enterprise software purchase sales. Before that, it was best of breed. I think we're back around to best of breed products, as long as those best of breed solutions are giving you those tools as an FI to really make those cognitive changes. If you don't have those, right, I think it's hard for you to really map out what that strategy is going to be in the first place.
Well, so let me, follow up with you then, because, thinking about just like your core banking system, but really like all fintechs, fintechs cores, they all have their, personalities, they all have, they're not all made equally, so if I'm in that position of making decisions to write the check, what are some of the, things that I should be thinking about or focusing on when it comes to just integrating an API, for my specific needs?
Right. So, I mean, there's some quick, simple things that you can ask of your technology vendors, if you will, that would help you position better just gathering information. So, do they have an open API standard, or they are trying to follow an open API standard that is out there today? Are they using documentation platforms like Swagger Hub, like Redoctly, to be able to do things like this? Because that helps your other vendors that are in your ecosystem that you're going to be selecting, or you as an institution, start to really understand what services are available, right? What are things that are broken up or componented so you can take advantage of? Do they have a plan for being able to, if you're an institution that is fortunate enough to be able to have developers on staff, does your vendors give your developers tools to be able to do this easily for adoption? Or is it still, I have to go ahead and call you up? Is it, a professional services engagement? Help me understand really what am I getting out of this package. Right? So you really want to go into what is already in their platforms today to make the lives of the financial institutions looking at APIs, adopting technology, and trying to make that change a whole lot easier.
So, again, I'm trying to think of this whole conversation from the customer standpoint, and trying to work my way back. So, Raj, I'm curious, when it comes to the dynamics between a fintech and a bank that have decided to partner together. So instead of having that, on-site dev team, but a bank that realizes we're not going to build this, we're going to really work with others. How can that relationship protect a bank's customers from downtime or lapses in service that could result from integrating with multiple vendors like we're talking about right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the key requirements you might want to sort of look at when you're talking to a vendor is about store and forward capabilities. But you're exactly right, and particularly around a core banking system, which usually everything sort of ties back to. If that is down, how does other pieces of technology in the sort of outer core ecosystems we talk about at Mantle fail gracefully? Obviously, you cannot transact if the core is down, but can you accept that transaction, store it, and then when the core is back up, run that transaction and fail gracefully? So that is key. APIs will break; they're not infallible, and the connections and the integrations between systems will break. But your technology vendor, if it is built to a standard that kind of works in the modern internet, should fail gracefully. And you should talk actually and ask specific questions in RFP processes, or even ask, see, when this fails, what does this look like? What is a user going to see? And also, when it returns, what is the user going to see? And what are we going to see as a bank? How much work are we going to have to do to rectify the situation? And your vendor should have really high quality answers to those questions and have thought through those exchanges. And if they're operating at any sort of volume, they should be able to talk to you quite articulately, because unfortunately, I could definitely tell you that on a monthly basis, systems of record do go down across the country.
Yeah. And so, putting my risk hat on for a moment, which again, banks love to think about the downside so they can mitigate it.
Yep.
There's privacy concerns when something breaks. There's, obvious, challenges that, organizations face. So, David, I know Aperture has done, some great work helping banks to understand, just different privacy acts that are coming out, whether it's, from California and their Consumer Privacy Act. I think about what's happened in Europe over the last, how many years? I mean, this has been going on for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Where is it that a fintech, can really help a bank prepare for some of the regulations on the horizon so that it plays into what Raj just said? It's, the preparation on the front end, not trying to respond after the fact.
Yeah, so I would echo what Raj said earlier about, choosing a vendor and having a vendor that is aware of the trends. We have no idea when something like GDPR is going to hit the United States. The regulatory environment may preclude that, or the business environment might preclude that. We don't know, but I would expect something of that nature will get imposed upon us as we go forward. So having a partner who can help you prepare for those types of changes and be able to assess, what impact that has on your business is going to be key to doing that. And APIs are a way of doing that, because you can basically put the implementation of those types of regulatory environments inside those API systems. And therefore, you're isolating the financial institution from having to manage themselves. They can rely on their software as a service provider to give them the assistance to meet those new regulatory compliance metrics and things like that. So that's a key point of picking a partner who's in it for the long haul, who understands how regulations have changed over the past 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and knowing what's coming down as well, and being able to plan for that in advance. It goes back to what you said earlier, and I think what Walter was saying too, about having a digital transformation strategy. This is one of those elements that has to be part of your strategy, being able to account for how things are going to change.
Yeah, well, I'm going to take my risk hat off, my banker hat off, and I'm going to go into the fun one, which is, how does all of this tie into growth and, and business performance? And so I'm just thinking, we've talked like stereotypically as an industry about open banking and, like open ecosystems and, different ways that, organizations can work. So Nikhil, let me look at you and ask about, how an open ecosystem, I guess, would drive deposits and, by extension, retention of customers.
Yeah, it's critical. And I try to put everything in perspective here with a real example. I don't want to talk in too high level. So again, think of your competition, right? All of your competition is doing the same things. There's probably not a there's probably not a community regional bank out there that doesn't have online banking, mobile banking, remote deposit capture. So these are all table stakes right now. Hey, even non-banks have these things now. You can deposit a check on a FinTech app. So then it becomes, how do I truly differentiate as a bank? And how do I do that without a single developer on staff? That is not my core competency. I don't know how to write code. I don't want to. I'm paying a vendor to do that. That's the whole point. So then, Al, it really becomes around openness, open framework. So Narmi is best known for our digital banking platform. So this is mobile and online banking for businesses and consumers. And the approach we've taken is let us handle the table stakes functionality and more for you, but let us allow you to extend that platform in whatever way you want. And really, just we've opened it up to fintechs, to third-party developers. Some banks, as you kind of cross that 10, 15, $20 billion range, have some internal in-house resources. So what does that do, Al? It allows those banks to differentiate. It allows them to bring in tools like goal-based savings, which helps for deposit retention, cross-selling life insurance and renters insurance within 30 seconds to further drive revenue and drive financial security with that customer. So it just allows you to go a lot deeper. And we've done a lot of analysis on correlation between the value of a bank and its digital platform. And you'll be surprised that a lot of banks still don't have organic, cost-effective DDA strategies in place. And I think we've proven out that it truly isn't rocket science. Consumers are just craving this seamless experience where they can truly get what they want. And the only way to make that happen is this concept of openness. So by embracing openness, an open API strategy, you're able to truly move the needle on deposit growth, deposit retention, all the metrics you want to hit, and you'll do it in a cost-effective manner. And so one of Narmi's 3 product pillars is openness. So I basically bet the next 10 years on that. So I hopefully feel pretty good about it.
Well, since you bet the next 10 years, I'm going to stick with you and ask you to go just a bit deeper and really try to give some color to the idea that you can differentiate yourself. And maybe it's as simple as talking about your brand and how a relationship with a fintech or multiple fintechs can help differentiate you as a business. Because I get the sense that in this digital world that we're in, there's so much being pushed on people. There has to be some way to be smarter about how you're positioning your organization. What do you sense about that?
There's a lot of strategies being employed there. I'm seeing you've got these amazing 100-year-old bank brands that are just doubling down on that, but doing it in a digital first way. So they've got 100 locations, that's been their bread and butter. And now they're just why would I throw away 100 years of hard work? Let me double down on that. You've got banks that have spun up digital-only brands and have kind of viewed that as to convert 100,000 retail customers and 20,000 business customers on a new platform is a massive project. To start anew and start afresh is not as massive of a project. Let me start with that. And the branding there, honestly, Al, I found that the hybrid approach works best, where you do a powered by X bank. If someone wants, I can give you plenty of examples offline. But instead of going with a brand new brand, I've seen that be really successful. So there's a number of strategies banks are employing. But I would say at the end of the day, customer doesn't care if you've got this back office process totally ironed out. They just care if it's super easy. Can they do what they want? And I think the most successful banks are the ones that prioritize the customer over their back office experience. And that's just what I've seen, right or wrong. So yeah, hopefully that's helpful.
No, it's helpful. And as you were talking, I got 2 different questions coming in. So I'll just take the first one. I'm going to throw it to Raj because I think he may have inspired this one, but anyone's welcome to chime in after. It's all around compatibility with the bank's core processor and really how, this person is looking for, advice on adding a fintech so that it overcomes any issues that might normally arise early on.
Yeah, so the single best thing that you can do to set yourself up for the next 5 or 10 years, and Nikhil's exactly right about the openness of what needs to come, is in your core contract, you have to have the right and the pre-baked economic terms and ideally day one installation of those APIs to get access to your core and unlimited use therein. And what we find most often in the industry is that those core contracts that were signed 3, 4, 5, 7 years ago maybe didn't contemplate that. And so institutions are now looking to partner with a great fintech they've found to solve a particular problem, and they're starting from day one, and they're having those conversations, and they realize that the friction to get moving is a lot longer than they thought it was, and they're adding to the ROI calculation the cost of getting access. But that's actually infrastructure and should be in the fixed base cost of your core system, right? And you're adding this API layer and you're assigning it to a project with Nikhil's company or a project with Dave's company or a project with Walter's company or with my company, right? And it's complicating the situation, and it's extending the timelines, and it's extending the time to value. And so the next contract, the best time to do it is in your total negotiation. We have generally found, and what our clients tell us is that is the best time. When you're adding it in between, you obviously have much less leverage. So getting that in your core contract, having it installed day one as part of the installation, having unlimited use of that API, right? Having that API documentation internally at the bank, and building a competency at the bank as to the capabilities of that API, not necessarily having to write code against it, but understanding what APIs you have installed and what they can and can't do from day one is critical. And when you have that infrastructure layer, guess what? In 2 years' time, you can go plug in this fintech, and in 3 years' time, you can plug in that fintech, because you can't propose at the start of your core contract what you're going to do over the next 7 to 10 years from an API perspective, which is why you have to get it all up front.
Yep. Walter, any advice you would add, or has Raj just like hit it head on?
I mean, I would only add to Raj is that, all the core banking platform providers out there in the United States, they're still all trying to figure out a way to differentiate each other from each other. But the reality is they still almost have the same base sum of technology, right? Many of these systems were created 35, 40, 50 years ago, right? At least some of the basics of it were small enhancements. But that's not new technology, right? So the API infrastructure that they've been trying to build on top of this older technology is going to be limited, no matter which way you cut it. What needs to happen is that as the core system providers evolve, again, as you're looking as an institution to evaluate your core system, you do need to have a plan in place that says, I want to be able to adopt these products and solutions. I don't want to be hindered by asking a third-party competitor, if you will, that I want to be able to add this product because it's my choice. It's my best-of-breed solution of what I decided. You had the opportunity to sell me something, but you didn't. So, don't make me have handcuffs to try to operate my solution just because you're the core. That doesn't necessarily really work when it comes to a dynamic relationship with all your vendors, right? You're putting some of your other vendors that you're selecting at risk, and your vision really ultimately at risk as well.
Yeah. So then here's the second question that came in right after. So it's all around a financial institution. We'll keep it nameless because it's not on my little chat, so I can't out you. So don't worry. But they're just starting out on their journey of middleware and developing an API library, and they're starting to open up some of their systems of record. And they pointed out to their mortgage services as one example. So they're looking to begin to more quickly adopt fintechs, but they're wondering about the pitfalls they might look out for as they start down this path. So, David, you've been quiet, and I see you nodding your head. Maybe you could take a crack at this one.
Yeah, that's a great question. What's really key about APIs is they provide what's really called an abstraction layer. They hide the API consumer, the client applications, et cetera, or business processes from the underlying implementation. So if someone's creating a new API, that's an important thing to keep in mind, is that the goal of an API is to enable the consumers to achieve their business goals. So use domain-driven design or whatever it is that takes, so you understand what problems they're trying to solve. And then you create APIs that address those problems. The inverse of that would be if you just take an existing system, take a core, for example, and you put an API around it. What ends up happening in that case is you tend to build in constraints in the API that are defined by how that core was implemented or what its interface is, and that lessens the ability of that API to actually solve business problems. So you have to go with an API-first approach. You go from the customer requirements and feature set that you need and create APIs that deliver that. And I think following up on the first question, what APIs can do for cores is provide an abstraction layer. So as we saw, a lot of the cores are providing a lot of the same basic functionality. But a fintech would be hobbled if they had to try to write their code to 40 or 50 different cores in order to get their work done. So if you have an abstraction layer provided by APIs, the fintechs can write to one API, and that code could then work on lots of different cores.
Gotcha. Well, here's a complimentary question. I'm going to try to break it into two parts. It's, again, you're kind of in the early stages, of your journey, and you're thinking about how do you bring in the best to your community, call it a community bank. So what does, something that's best in class look like from a customer experience point of view, but then there's also the back end perspective and the features or benefits that a bank should be thinking about when they're selecting a vendor. So again, I'm going to try to break that into two parts. Maybe, Walter, maybe you could take the first piece, which is, you're starting on this path, you're thinking about the customer experience and what something really exceptional would look like. And then, Raj, I'll probably come to you and talk to you about the back end perspective as it relates to selecting a vendor.
Yeah, so for front end, I mean, I would say, again, the selection process, which a financial institution has to go through, and the things that they want flexibility, right? So think about the user interface first and foremost. Does the consumer get drawn in? Are they finishing the action they want to be able to go to that site for or the app for in the first place? Is it easy? Does it drive them back because the experience was simplistic but functional, right? Did it get the job done? Did it make them feel like this was easy to use? So user interface and the design around the user interface, whether, again, you're a small business user or you're, just a private consumer, I think that's quite important and be able to distinguish between the two. I would tell you that the ecosystem that the front end vendors offer, right? So if you need to bolt in, and again, I'm going to generalize, but deposit account opening is one thing and that has its own unique workflow, but you have potentially 6, 7 different vendors that are feeding data into that experience, right? Are those vendors easy for you to be able to use on and off, and how do those services correlate to your consumers easily as well? Is it not making it difficult for them to get through that process? So the further that I think that you can build up a strategy or the experience around the services that you want to get to your customers, and your front end vendors or your vendors are able to offer that in that experience, that's going to be able to, I think, help you in the back end as kind of Raj takes over the question.
Yeah, sure, no worries. From a back-end perspective, I think the single biggest mistake we see is that, and we see this on the front end in the customer experience as well, is banks think that they need to design for 100% of use cases. So if you get 100 applications, they think they need to design for every single one of those applications using technology. And actually what is the reality of this situation is technology is actually very good at solving probably 83% of those, right? And it can do them completely automatically without human intervention and arrive at decisions and drive it to those 83 applications to a cost structure of virtually zero. But if you try to make technology, try to improve the cost structure or drive automation for all 100, what you actually end up doing is diminishing the result on the 83, and the total savings and the total value that you have created actually gets diminished. And so the value of technology in the back office isn't to automate everything. It's to automate what necessarily needs to be automated and can be automated to an extremely high level of efficiency. By the way, as technology improves, that number increases. And then to take the dividend that you got from those 83 applications and keep the human touch on the 17 applications that actually still, that is the most effective use of your time. And what you actually do, because you free up resources, is guess what? Those 17 people that were exceptions are now delighted with your institution because they're getting attention more quickly. Right? And it actually drives up your brand, right? The simple cases were automated. The complex cases had human hands. You can get people on the phone. And that is if you crystallize that in your mind as how you should utilize back office technology and take that approach to it, what you'll find is amazing results. And that we've seen that drive the best economic outcomes.
Yeah, and so this is probably a good place for me to pause. I feel spoiled because I get to ask the questions to the guys and, kind of lead us down this path. But what we're going to do now is close this part of the webinar and really invite people to join us for the peer exchanges. These are the exchanges that are exclusive to our bank attendees. If you previously indicated that you'd be joining the exchanges, we have you broken into small groups. We have unique links that were emailed to you on Wednesday, March 3rd, and again earlier this morning from Nicole Smith, who's my colleague who's been just awesome in putting this whole thing together. So I'm giving shouts out to Nicole. You can click on that link. I have got more questions. I know people want to talk about at the abstraction layer that David talked about. Other people are interested in industry standards for APIs and who drives those standards. So there's going to be, I think, some really rich conversations. But David, Walter, Nikhil, and Raj, you've done just a nice service to all of us in a very short period of time to help put some real interesting context to some concepts that I think we're all really interested in. So again, I'm Al Dominic. On behalf of the entire Bank Director and FinXTech team, thanks for taking your time for this. We hope you enjoy the peer exchange if that's where you're heading to next.
Yes.